Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our backyard. This video is about what has happened in our yard since we've been on vacation. We've been gone for the last 12 days and just returned, and I wanted to show you some things that we had set up in our garden and how they fared. So right off the bat, I do want to say we had a couple of areas in the shade. This one happens to be under our cypress tree. And then we have another area over here under our Chinese tallow tree that is in the shade. And we set these up. We set these up with sprinklers. So I'm going to come a tad bit closer. So we set it up with sprinklers, and you're going to have to ignore all the grass because, of course, we have not mowed yet. This is our unvarnished version. And in our shade, we set up plants that weren't on drip, and they fared pretty well. Some didn't probably want as much water as they did get, but they fared well. This is the other area that we set up with a sprinkler, and it sprinkled this whole area, and we had it on a timer that went off every day for 30 minutes. My two Swedish ivy plants, I have one that I brought down that is also on a sprinkler. This ivy plant didn't fare as well, and I'm not sure if it got enough water or too much, and it looks chlorotic. So I was somewhat surprised when I came back and saw this one in my tree. It's looking pretty tough. It did not like its life in these 12 days. It has been brutally hot here in Zone 9A along the Texas Gulf Coast near Houston, and we have drip irrigation, but apparently it wasn't enough. We've had 100-degree days, and I'm really surprised my bronze fennel isn't doing as well. So I'm going to have to take a look and see. I think it just didn't get watered enough. I was surprised to see one of my rock and fuchsia salvia didn't make it. The other two look stressed, but I must not had enough water that was being delivered to this particular salvia. So I'm really surprised. And like I said, we've had brutally hot temperatures and have had heat advisories. It's been miserable here, is my understanding, and our poor plants didn't have, I guess, all the water that they needed. Mystic Spires is looking a little bit tough, but now that I'm back, I'll be able to get the needed water in. The Misty back here looks really good. So, you know, it just can be dependent on what had access to the water and what didn't have the access that it needed. And goodness, in 12 days, I was just surprised how many of my coleus flowered. I had what I thought all the coleus flower buds that were coming up all pinched back. So everything looked like this before I left. And I am just surprised with how many just in these 12 days came up and said, nope, we are going to flower. I don't like to have my coleus flower I guess it is mid-June now, but then they get pretty leggy, and I do let them flower towards the end of the season because my pollinators really love coleus flowers. But I didn't want them to flower this early, so I thought I had taken care of this before I left. Or it's just in 12 days, they just exploded with growth. And this happens to be in my shade bed. Some of my vines found each other that I keep separate. So they decided to become fast friends here. That's not surprising. My tithonia are overgrown. Oh my goodness. And I certainly didn't think that they would top 7 feet, but they are just going and growing. I did have a problem with some of our drip irrigation, and it wasn't the irrigation itself as it was with squirrels. Oh my goodness, I do have a squirrel problem, and I guess, they're just trying to survive too. And of what they've done, I don't know if they could smell the water, but something chewed, I do believe it was squirrels, but something chewed into our drip irrigation 1/2 inch plastic hard pipe, and unfortunately sprung leaks, and I suppose they were drinking the water, and so some of my gardens did not get as much water as what was needed. And so you can see here some of the tithonia really wilted. I did, when we got back late yesterday afternoon, I did come back in here and hand water to try to get some of these plants to see if they would be able to come back. Plants are still thriving. I do have some mishaps. My John Fanick phlox, I don't know if we had some wind, but some of my phlox has toppled over, but it is looking okay. One little bright spot is my poor little plant here that my blue chiffon Rose of Sharon was not doing well at all, and he seems to have perked up. And of course I have some good-sized weeds that typically get pulled up and are not able to get to this this growth level. Another surprise is volunteer portulaca. Oh my goodness. I don't know, I had a portulaca that was in a hanging basket, and I guess some seeds blew this way. Interesting. I come back and I see the first blooms of my Mexican bird of paradise. I was so happy to see this. They have such cheery and beautiful, gorgeous blooms. My giant milkweed are certainly loving their life back here. If you leave for 12 days and return, you'll definitely notice how much you weed, even though it just seems a part of your normal everyday stuff. And weeds have exploded. Now the next morning when I look with fresh eyes, I have lost a couple of things, but most everything did well, or at least survived on the drip irrigation. And some things I'm just going to have to take a look at, like I'm surprised with how poorly my Turk's cap did, and maybe it just got too much irrigation. So some things might have gotten a little bit too much, and other things just not enough. And that's, I guess, the crux of it, right? When you're here, you can evaluate and see what needs to happen. And I guess I just didn't really realize how much I would do that. And I would have noticed a plant, such as my liatris here, even though it was done blooming. I still have some green down at the base, but it did not get enough water. And I would have noticed that had I been here. But for the most part, I have to be really happy with how the drip irrigation performed and sustained our plants. So even though it's not like when you're here and you can evaluate things and adjust, I have to be very happy with how things have turned out. Yes, I have a couple of losses here and there. I do have some unruly plants. Like, what am I going to do here? Ugh. But for the most part, even though I underwatered, what we believe we probably underwatered some, and some things are looking tough, overall, I have to be very pleased with the performance being gone that long. Now I just have tons of work to do. I guess being in survival mode, I was surprised with my hibiscus. I've got one area, I guess, that's self-selected to keep itself alive, and died back. For instance, in one of my containers, I didn't have my drip placed well, and so I did lose one of my Salvia grigii, which I was sad to see. And it also looks like something got into one of my containers and decided to maybe cool off. You know, and I have to laugh because some things that you just don't realize that you're doing kind of come to light when you're gone. So as you know, I really like these pots of caladiums, and I had said in a prior video that I was so tickled with these because I purchased them as bedding plants, and they were $1.99 bedding plants, and they just became these beautiful planters. And they didn't appreciate their life as much when I was gone, and so I did have them on drip, whereas before I didn't, and I hand watered them, and so they probably got a little bit too much water. Hopefully they'll come back to where they'll be full again. But you notice little things like this. And what was once just gorgeous now has survived and is okay. And the other thing, I just can't get over these coleus that just decided to pop up. And they've popped up and grown, and it's like, oh goodness, I've got lots of work in the garden, which is absolutely fine. I'll be bringing you along as I continue gardening in my backyard, doing some damage control, doing some recovery, but all in all, I'm really have to be happy with how my garden looks. I'm curious, what do y'all do when you leave for a few days? I was gone for 12, And I just didn't think it was fair to have someone come and take care of the yard. That was just too many days. And so I heavily relied on drip irrigation that we had installed last summer that were on timers, 3 sprinklers that were set up on timers, and then just hoping that we had things set up correctly. And even though I didn't have quite enough water delivered, I didn't have too many losses. So let me in the comments know, let me know what you do. I'd be real curious. All in all, I would have to say this was a success. What do you think? All right, well, thanks for joining me this morning. We've got lots of work to do. But you know what? That's something that I love doing. All right, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day today, and thanks for joining me.